Hey everyone, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard, the channel dedicated to raising awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's modern society. And today I want to dive into a conversation that came up during my weekly live show, Boy Meets Squirrel, a week or so ago. During the show, I had the pleasure of speaking with a good friend of mine, David Pisarra, who's a divorce attorney from LA, and we discussed a topic that is becoming increasingly relevant for men. And the question that was asked was, should men consider wearing body cams whenever they're out in public or in situations where they might have to interact with women? Now, before anyone jumps to any conclusions, let's be clear. This isn't about paranoia, nor is it some grand conspiracy against women. What it's about is self-protection and self-preservation. It's about recognizing the reality that false allegations, while rare relatively speaking, happen often enough that men have every reason to be concerned. I liken it to having car insurance. You don't technically need it every day unless you're a really, really bad driver. But those few times in your life that you do need it, well, let's just say it sure does come in handy, doesn't it? Now, both David and I are advocates for men wearing body cams, but what really stood out to me wasn't just the conversation itself, but the reaction, which at least from the ladies, wasn't very positive. In fact, I'd venture to say that many women absolutely hate the idea of men wearing body cams, which is why I wanted to make this video to explain a bit more in depth why they should, and more importantly, why they shouldn't. During the show, David shared some powerful insights on why men should be proactive about protecting themselves. And we talked about real-life cases where men lost everything, their careers, their reputations, their freedom, all because of a false allegation that had no evidence behind it. And that's where the body cams come in. Because you see, having a recording of interactions isn't about distrusting women as a whole. It's about making sure that, should a man ever be accused, he has proof to defend himself. In a world where believe all women has become a mantra, in fact, I'd argue the de facto assumption made by law enforcement, juries, and society as a whole, video evidence is a man's best friend. Now, predictably, as I said, some people, all women by the way, weren't too happy about this discussion. One woman in particular went on a tirade, furious that David and I would even suggest men should protect themselves in this way. First, she tried to claim that wearing a body cam was illegal, an argument that we quickly debunked. While yes, recording laws vary by state, and you should find out what they are in your state, generally speaking, at least in public spaces, there is no expectation of privacy. And when that didn't work, she pivoted to a different argument, one I'm sure won't surprise many of you, which was to say that it was offensive and sexist for a man to wear a body cam. Yeah, you heard that right. Sexist. Her reasoning? It's disrespectful to women and implies that they're all liars. And then she came to the most ridiculous claim of all, that a man wearing a body cam is actually abusive towards women. Yeah, it's abusive because it might discourage a woman from reporting harassment or an assault. Now let that sink in for a moment. A man taking steps to protect himself is somehow an attack on women. That's the kind of twisted logic we're dealing with here, and I argue the very proof why men should wear body cams. Why would she think that way? Why is it that some women hate the idea of men wearing body cams? Well, let's break it down. First, it challenges the power of false allegations. If a man has video proof of an interaction, it becomes much harder for a woman to fabricate a story about what happened. That means women who would otherwise make or be tempted to make a false claim lose that ability. They lose that power over men. Secondly, it disproves and debunks the all men are dangerous narrative. If body cam footage consistently shows that the overwhelming majority of men are not predatory, then the fear-mongering about men as a collective threat falls apart. The truth is, the overwhelming majority of men pose absolutely no danger. No danger to women and no danger to society. Yes, there are a few who do, but that number is in reality less than 1%. And oh, by the way, just a quick side note, one that will shock some people, but there's a similar number of women who also are a threat as well. But no one wants to have that inconvenient fact discussed, do they? Sadly, though, society has conditioned people, especially women, to assume the worst. And that's what they end up doing, making assumptions. To the point now that even the most innocuous of comments or behaviors are twisted and manipulated in women's minds into acts of aggression or harassment by a man. There are more than enough cases, more than enough evidence of men being accused of heinous things simply for saying hello or have a nice day that prove this point. Add to it, body cams force accountability. Much like many argue police should wear body cams to hold themselves accountable, it applies to the general public as well. Just as body cams have changed the game in law enforcement by providing objective evidence of interactions, they can do the same in everyday life for everyday people, especially men. And while it's sad that we've reached that point, it is where we are at right now. And it's why some people, especially those who would benefit from the ambiguity, don't want it. Now let's talk about why I think women should support men wearing body cams. And I argue that rather than being upset about men wearing body cams, women should welcome it. Because just as it protects men, it also protects women. If a man is truly guilty of harassment or assault, then body cam footage would be the best possible evidence to support her claims. It would help counter the argument so many advocates make that women aren't believed. But let's be real. The reason so many women oppose this idea isn't because they're worried about justice for them. It's about them being held to the standards of justice themselves. You see, body cams would go a long way towards removing the ability to manipulate situations based on perception rather than fact. And that's a problem for women. A problem for women, especially those that think not with rationality, but emotion. Here's something else to consider. A woman's fear of a man being dangerous is statistically far less justified than a man's fear of being falsely accused. The number of men who commit violent crimes against women is actually fairly small. The number of men who are falsely accused? In the millions every single year, much larger than many people want to admit. You'll often hear people make the argument that statistics show only 2% of allegations are found to be false. But that's a very misleading number and leaves out some very pertinent facts, because it only takes into account those times when a woman was actually charged and convicted of making a false allegation. It does not account for women who've never been charged or even investigated, even when police have overwhelming evidence that she's lying. Nor does it take into account the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of allegations made in the workplace and family court every single year. Allegations which are rampant. And I also want to point out, it doesn't even have to be deliberate. The fact is, the risk of a woman assuming a man is up to no good is far greater than the actual likelihood that he is. But in our current culture, fear-based narratives matter more than statistical reality. So in the end, should men wear body cams? I say yes, absolutely. And not because all women are liars, but because it only takes one false allegation, deliberate or not, to destroy a man's life. And let's be clear, if a man faces a false allegation, no matter how innocent he is, no matter how much evidence there is proving his innocence, his life will still be destroyed. Even in cases where women have come forward and admitted they made it all up, the accused man is still assumed to be guilty by many. And if you're a woman who finds this whole discussion offensive, I ask you why. Would you be angry at a store owner for installing security cameras? Would you be mad at someone for locking their doors at night? Are you mad at police officers and the like having to wear body cams to hold them accountable? Of course not, because taking precautions isn't about distrust, it's about being smart. It's about being prudent and mitigating risks. And in this case, men have a very, very real risk that they need to protect themselves from. So men, go protect yourselves. And ladies, unless you and your fellow women have something to hide, y'all have nothing to worry about. So what do you think? Should men wear body cams? Should they do things to protect themselves? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.